Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Beatrice Hyppolite and this is your world. Hello everyone and welcome back to a new session of Your World with Dr. Beatrice Hyppolite. And today we have a very great topic to talk about. So today we're going to talk about depth psychology, shame, and narcissistic personality disorder. And we have the expert with us today. Last time we had that person with us where we spoke about depth psychology. And today it is my privilege to welcome back on this show my friend Andrew Charles. Hello.
Hi, Beatrice. It's wonderful to be back here today on Your World with you, Beatrice. And yes, as you said, today we'll be talking about depth psychology, shame, and narcissism, particularly narcissistic disorder, from a depth psychological frame. As you know, there's a lot of information in the public domain about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder, and some of it is somewhat cult-like, and some of it is somewhat pop psychology-like. Today, what we'll be doing is talking about it from a depth psychological frame of reference and giving you information, and giving the viewers information about how we see it and how we work within that in terms of responding to the person who is struggling with narcissism.
Then
Yes.
you have the mic. Walk us through it.
Yes. So as I said previously when I was on the show, depth psychology was primarily developed by Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Alfred Adler. And it is a psychology that is concerned with what is happening at the unconscious level of the individual, and to see, well, how the unconscious is informing behaviors that are problematic and impeding normal social functioning. It also looks at how the unconscious also show up in the culture, right, in politics and other spheres of life. So for today, what I want to do is just to talk about how depth psychology within the Jungian psychological frame is practiced. I think I mentioned this before, but I would just like to reiterate it again today.
Okay.
In terms of the Jungian depth psychological frame, when we're looking at the Jungian psychotherapy practice, there are 4 stages with which the individual must go through with the analyst or the therapist. And the first stage has to do with confession. As I said before, we cannot heal what we are avoiding, right? What we are putting aside. So you have to come to terms with the truth of what is happening. And it is done in such a way that it's somewhat confessional. So following that is elucidation, where the therapist and the patient will be talking a little about what does this mean for the person, right? To give them more context. Following that, you have the educational component, where the therapist is providing education and holding for the individual, right? To help them to understand and to interpret some of the things that they're struggling with. They may not have the appropriate assessment for it, right? Or they're not dealing with it in an appropriate way. So the therapist is providing that education. What we call in clinical social work is called psychoeducation, providing education in a psychological sense. And the last part has to do with transformation, whereby those things that we're struggling with, parts of the personality that has been split off, is been able to be reintegrated into the personality. And so that person now has transformed those issues, right? And they're moving towards wholeness, psychological wholeness. The thrust of Jungian psychology has to do with individuation. And in order for us to get to that individuation place, there's certain things that we must go through. And one of the things that is critical for that process is to look at the shadow component of the personality.
When you say certain things that we
Yeah.
have to go through,
Yes.
so if you were to give an example, what that will be?
Okay, so the first part, as I said, is that confessional component, right? Where we're seeing things that we've been struggling with, and we really didn't have the space and the safety and security to bring it forward and to be witnessed, right? And to process. So you have that. And as you're going through that initial stage, what we tend to find in the work is that there's parts of the personality that's been split off, cut off, projected, repressed, and that part goes into the shadow. The shadow is defined by Jung as those parts of ourselves that we don't want, right? That I said earlier, we project, we repress, we split off. We just cut it off from ourselves. We don't want it. We turn our backs towards that part of ourselves. But the thing about it is that it doesn't go away. It remains. And Jung talks about the fact that the darker the person's shadow is, the denser the problem is, right? So we want to make sure that the person is able to look at, to tolerate the things that they split off, right? And when it's needed, for them to integrate those parts of themselves so that they can become more whole. Yes.
So you mentioned 4 components.
So the 4 components has to do with confession, elucidation, education, and transformation.
Okay.
Those parts
And those 4 components are vital.
are vital.
Okay.
They are vital. Now, there are various features, methods that we use in Jungian psychology. And one of it has to do with dream interpretation, and the second one that is vital is active imagination. Dream interpretation helps us to understand what is happening at the unconscious level, whereby we are able to bypass the ego and to see, well, what is happening outside of the ego's defenses, right? And the other thing in terms of active imagination, what we do with that is to help the individual to bring up various images and to have a dialogue with the image. Sometimes it may be a dream image, right? And we have a dialogue with the image, whereby the ego is engaging with the image and there is a response that is occurring in a very contained way. Yeah.
So, Andrew, I would like for you to give me some connection between depth psychology, shame, and narcissistic personality. How those 3 are related.
Okay. Well, the way in which we look at narcissism, we look at it from the perspective that some type of wounding had occurred, right? And a lot of times what we find is that the wounding tend to come from a place of shame, right? Where the individual is not able to tolerate what was said to them, given to them. Sometimes it may be something that they would have inherited from their culture or their family, right? So we're looking at narcissism within that sense to see, well, okay, what is it that this person is avoiding? What is it that this person is not able, what truth, what reality this person is not able to face because of it's intolerable, right? They're not able to face it because it's full of shame. It's full as if the person is of no value. And so they would not want to look at it at all.
So basically, so it's like the damage was done, but the person may not be able to accept or understand the gravity of that damage.
Yes.
And with depth psychology, I'm trying to understand
Yes.
And with depth psychology, so it's like that method will help me as the patient understand the reason why I'm exhibiting those type of behaviors.
Okay.
Am I right?
Okay. So depth psychology is not going to help you to understand that in particular.
Okay.
What depth psychology, because any type
so
of yes,
I asked the question that
exactly.
way because I wanted you to, to explain it, to the viewers for them to fully understand it.
Yes. So, okay. Any type of psychology that provides psychological holding, right, for an individual to help them to face difficult things that they would have experienced is useful, right, and helpful and provide healing. Depth psychology is no different from that. What we do in terms of looking at those areas of shame is that we look at it in a very gentle, cautious, patient way with the individual to help them to understand that, well, sometimes shame could be good because it helps you to regulate yourself and it helps you to inform your moral compass. Shame in that sense is good. Toxic shame, on the other hand, is difficult and destructive in the sense that you are engaging in types of behaviors that you are avoiding any type of limitation, you are avoiding your humanity, you're avoiding a form of morality as well. So what we do is we try to get you to see, well, it is okay to feel this way, right? It may not be okay because you had the experience at the time, right, in the past, but it is okay to feel that way in a moment. And the point of it is to help the person to be more in touch with their humanity and their humanness. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So narcissistic personality individual is somebody who tend to be selfish, somebody who tend not to show any empathy for others, and somebody who prey on others
Yes.
for their own benefit. So if you were to deal with a client like that, how will you employ depth psychology to help regulate that person, behavior?
Okay, but first of all, we need to look at the diagnosis for narcissism, and I'm going to turn to the DSM-5. Let's go to the Bible for personality disorders and all type of mental health issues. So according to the DSM-5, a person is diagnosed with narcissistic personality if they meet 5 of these 9 criteria. And the first one is grandiose self-importance, whereby the person exaggerates their achievements, their talents, and they expect to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. The second is preoccupied with fantasies. They have this fantasy about being successful, have ultimate power, they're brilliant, they're beautiful, they're the ideal thing for love, right? So it's fantasy in the sense that, and they're not grounded in reality. They're in a different place.
But you have some people who have all those material components, but still exhibit narcissistic personality traits.
Yes, yes. But what the DSM says is that these patterns, to be clinically diagnosed, it has to provide certain types of distress and impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. So these different types of criteria that the DSM is alluding to has to be present in different domains of life. So I just want to continue in terms of the criteria. So the third one is belief that they're special or unique and can only be understood or should be associated with people of a higher status and people who are in different types of position of power, right? They require excessive admiration. They have a sense of entitlement, and they have interpersonal exploitative behaviors. They lack empathy, and they're often envious of others and believe that people are envious of them. And finally, there's a show of arrogant behavior and attitude where they display an haughty, patronizing, and condescending behavior towards other people. So 5 of these have to be present, yes, for you to diagnose this personality disorder. Now, what we find is that a person who is bona fide narcissist would not come to therapy. They would not come. But someone who is struggling with a narcissistic wound may come to therapy. And I have patients who have had several narcissistic wounds.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but the first category you just mentioned, you said that they will not come,
They often do not come to therapy.
to therapy. So,
Yes.
is there a reason why?
Yes, the reason, as the DSM highlights, right? They believe that therapy is not for them, that they're too smart for therapy. And for those persons who do visit the therapist, oftentimes they do that out of trying to say that they are better than the therapist, they're more powerful than the therapist, that they want to show the therapist that they are wrong and they are right, right? That the therapist was wrong and they are right. I have an example from the culture about someone who's struggling with narcissistic personality and other pathological personalities that went to therapy. And it's a show that we were looking at for a long time. Tony Soprano. What's the name of that show with Tony Soprano?
I don't
The Sopranos. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So it's the Sopranos, where Tony, who was struggling with a mother complex, he had a severe mother complex to the point where anytime his mother showed disappointment in him, he would go into a rage and he would take that out on other people. And what we saw in the show, there were 2 instances, I believe, whereby his mother was ill and he was afraid that she was going to die. And so he had no control over that process, right? And so he started to experience somewhat like of a fit kind of thing, where one time he lost consciousness and just fell, right? He went to the therapist for help dealing with his mother situation. And what he was trying to do was trying to buy over the therapist, like to take her over, right? So what you find with people who are narcissists, who come to therapy, they come there not necessarily to get well, in a way engaged in a battle with the therapist. Thankfully, I have not had an experience so far in my practice of 7+ years. I have not had an experience whereby I'm engaging with someone who wants to do battle with me in that sense. I've had other instances, but not that. You asked the question about how do we engage someone who presents with narcissistic traits.
How does therefore psychology engage somebody who exhibited those traits?
Yes, we do that by looking at the person's dreams to see about what is coming up for them. We're helping the individual to integrate parts of their shadow. We're helping them to see their limitations, right? And to show humility and regard for self, right? We're helping the person to have compassion for others. And we do that, again, in a very gentle way. There's some notes that I'd like to allude to in terms of that specifically. So, as I said, we want to engage the person in looking at their dreams and using dream interpretation and active imagination. We are looking to help them to build genuine connection, right, in the work with us. We're looking at the transference consideration, like what is it that is being transferred in the moment with the patient, and helping them to tolerate the tension that may come up, right? One of the things about Jungian psychology is that he asks us to hold the tension of the opposite, and also to be in that space of paradox where 2 or 3 things can be true, right? And you're holding both of them together without leaning too far on one side or the other, all right? The important thing for the work is timing and patience. That's what's important for engaging with someone who has a narcissistic structure, right? Not necessarily the personality, but the structure. Yes.